My name is Mia Atkins-Beason. This is my final exam presentation for the class ELP 7120-901, History of American Higher Education. This evening I will be discussing some of the events that I wrote on my timeline for our midterm exam. Upon completion of that, I will talk about a few other things that happened in history, and then I will conclude by reiterating what I feel will be the future of higher education. I want to first talk about the colleges in the colonial era prior to 1871. Primarily these 9 colleges that you see on the screen. You have Harvard, William and Mary, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, Brown, Rutgers, and Dartmouth. These 9 colleges were part of an elite group of colleges that catered to prominent and wealthy men. These men were interested in ensuring that the education that they obtained would provide them with literacy, social standing and prominence, and the power that they would need to become prominent men such as lawyers, statesmen, political leaders, business owners, doctors, engineering, etc. During this time frame, these colleges mimicked European counterparts or their predecessors in relations to architecture, which if you look at the screen, you can see the different forms of architecture that are quite actually similar. And sometimes it ended up being a competition amongst the colleges to see who could build a bigger and better college to bring more students to the college campuses. Let's start by talking about the Revolutionary War of 1775 through 1783. The Revolutionary War landed colleges in a state of flux because what ended up happening is schools that were prominent, who were having all these students, all of a sudden had students who wanted to enlist in the war to help and add to their country their contribution of service. One of the problems that the colleges faced was that they were being taxed. They couldn't afford to do the world tax because they had no students. So a lot of universities and college upon the Revolutionary War had to shut their doors. One thing that I need to mention that among all these, Thomas Jefferson was among the leading voices wanting to see education extend its boundaries beyond the elite society. The next thing I would like to talk about would be Dartmouth College versus Woodward. This case was instrumental because it assisted with the principles which corporations would then use to assure that they were protected against changes by the states for public reasons. In other words, what this actually did was secure the opportunity for colleges and for corporations to assure that with their service that they were lending, that they would be compensated. It was all about money. Okay, my next slide. Diversity and adversity from 1860 to 1890. One of the things that happened was the American Civil War between 1861 and 1865. The American Civil War was primarily fought because 11 states in the South was not willing to abolish slavery. Within 4 years that the war was fought, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by President Abraham Lincoln. Young men across the country enlisted in the armies, draining colleges of their students once again. Over the course of the war, the Confederacy converted many public or semi-public buildings into hospitals, including courthouses, hotels, and factories. During this time, one instrumental piece of legislation to come out of it was the Morrill Act of 1862. Morrill believed that classical education offered at most colleges was incapable of meeting the practical roll-up-your-sleeve demands of a growing industrializing nation. After the Morrill Act, the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed and passed. Because of this, education would then become possible for African Americans, such as myself. Thank you. Cornell University was one of the first Ivy League co-education college who just admitted qualified students, regardless of their nationality, their race, their social circumstance, their gender, or their religion. To a certain degree, it was frowned upon. However, Cornell University was one of the universities that spearheaded the opportunity for people other than affluential people or men, and especially women and African Americans, to get that college education that they would soon need. The captains of the industry from 1880 to 1910. The Hatch Act. This was the Hatch Act funding funding of agriculture experiment stations at a single land grant college within each state. It allowed colleges the opportunity to get land to build their institutions up. So it was truly a resource for colleges. The Morrill Act of 1890, especially for black institutions in the South, the triple mission of the land grant institution is the concept of research, instruction, and extension of service. And because of the Morrill Act, specific colleges, historically black colleges, were allowed the opportunity to get land so that they can then begin educating African American students as well as women and other students. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896. Homer Plessy in a premeditated act of defiance, boarded a train in New Orleans and announced that he was neither white nor inclined to move to a section for African Americans. He was arrested and convicted for this act. However, he appealed his conviction, and the United States Supreme Court ruled that as long as accommodations were equal, states could legally enforce segregation. So he lost his case. Oh, I'm so sorry. I went too fast. Another thing that happened during this period that needs to be mentioned was the Booster Junior and Community Colleges were created. These colleges were created so that students who were not quite ready for the four-year institutions, or who could not afford to attend the four-year institutions, could have some sort of technical training. And this still holds prevalent today. As of today, that's exactly what community colleges, junior colleges are meant to do. They're meant to be that mediary between students who may not be able to go to a four-year institution and who want the technical training. So during this period of time, this is when these colleges were created, and this is why, so that they can have a source of technical training, technical skills that were needed. Please forgive me, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. That were needed to get sustainable employment. Alma mater and success and excess from 1890 to 1954. I'm going to briefly talk about a little of these for the sake of time. World War II was from 1939 to 1945. The GI Bill was instrumental in higher education. The Truman Commission reports in 1946 was instrumental. The creation of ACTs and SATs, standardized testing, that was instrumental. But the thing that was the most prevalent, I would say, was Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. This ruling set a precedent because it was the first time the schools were deemed unconstitutional, and by law all schools had to desegregate. Growing pains within higher education, federal dollars were given for research, military education, and military training. The successes and failures of colleges, the successes, I think, were the GI Bill and the community and junior colleges being created. The failures were still, and to me, are still, equality for women and equality for blacks. The amendment of the 1964 Higher Education Act, it assisted with forming the Basic Educational Opportunities Grant. The government took an active role, and because of it, it was renamed the Pell Grant, and it made accessibility to college more realistic. I can truly say because of this, I was able to attend college. Higher education in the future. Access to quality education prior to higher education. I think that this is one thing that we need to look at when it comes to the future. Students being educated to master, not just trained to pass tests. And then assistance with students when they enter college underprepared and not equipped to educationally be in college. I think this is something also that we need to focus. And until we do so, we're going to have some of the failure rates that we do. things that can make a difference that would change the current situation, putting education back in the high schools. Like I said, making sure that students graduate ready for college. It becomes hard for the technical colleges and the community college when students are not prepared to be in college. Thank you, classmates, for a great semester. Thank you for your support, feedback, and discussions for this class. Have a great rest of the semester, and until the next set of classes, be forever blessed. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.